Welcome back, students. All right, this is the last homework video for the Time Value of Money series. So pat yourself on the back if you made it this far. If you've been following along, I hope that you're doing well. I hope that you're learning and growing. All right, so amortization is the last thing that I teach when it comes to time value of money before we move on to bonds and stocks and all sorts of other fun stuff. Now, I will say that this is the way that I teach it in class. I am working on upgrading it, but there is a way to actually do this on the calculator. I will make a separate video for that for those that are interested, but in this case, I suggest that you follow the steps I'm providing. This will help you do well on the exam. And if you're not my student and you're following along, don't worry. I think you'll still get some value out of this video. All right, so let's move on, but I just wanted to point out that this is a real amortization table that I built specifically for the thumbnail for my video. So when we're done with this video, maybe you can come back and take a look at it and see what I have done here. All right, let's keep going here. Okay, so as always, leave me any time value of money questions. I'll be happy to make a video and answer them. And don't forget, you can download this file and follow along. Now, for this video, there's only going to be 3 questions. They can be a little involved, so we're going to keep it simple, all right? Now, the purpose of this video is to understand the elements of amortization and to learn how to calculate individual elements of the amortization process. Don't worry, I'm going to show you what that means. You don't have to understand what that means right now. Okay, so let's jump right into this question. You want to borrow $5,600 from the bank for 1 year. The bank has offered you an annual rate of 10%. Create a 1-year amortization table. That's what we're going to do here. Create a 1-year amortization table. Okay, so how much have we borrowed? This is a little different. As you can see, the layout is different. So how much have we borrowed? We've borrowed $5,600 for how many years? For 1 year. What's the rate? 10%. And this is what we need to calculate, okay? We need to calculate the payment. Now, I will say this our rule of thumb of pluses and minuses starts to break down. We need to start keeping track of that on our own, okay? So let's clear our time value of money. So what are we going to do? What's really important for these amortization tables is the first thing is you need to find the payment, okay? So we're going to use our time value of money keys to find out how much we should be paying. So let's start from left to right. What is the timeline? It's 1 year. Okay. What's the interest rate? It's 10%. Hopefully you guys are comfortable enough now with the keys to know to not have to use that chart we've been using. The present value is what we borrowed. So $5,600. Okay, the payments are what we're looking for, and we're going to pay that down to 0, so future value is 0. So let's compute the payment. So the payment is going to be $6,160. All right, so $6,160. That is what we're going to pay in the year. So now let's get into our actual amortization table. So we're going to do year 1. The beginning amount is what we borrowed, okay? The beginning amount is what we borrowed, so that goes here, $5,600. The payment amount is what we've calculated, so $6,160. Now, one thing I want you to know is that the payment is broken down into 2 pieces, the interest and the repayment of principal, okay? So for the interest, okay, for the interest, how do we get the interest? We take our beginning amount, I'm going to label this A, and we multiply it by our rate, okay, our borrowing rate, okay? So in this case, it's the $5,600 times 10%. I'm not going to use my calculator for that. I know that that is $560. So $560. Now the principal repayment or repayment of principal, so I'm going to call it repayment of principal, is going to equal the payment minus the interest. Let's call this B minus the interest. Okay, so the 6,160, right? The repayment of principal. So let's take, I mean, I know what the answer is, but just so that you guys are aware, 6,160. Let's change that to a positive. Let's subtract the interest minus 560. That gives us our original amount that we borrowed because we're repaying back the whole thing. Oops, let's do that in red. So we've paid back the entire amount we borrowed. And the ending balance is simply the repayment of principal minus the beginning amount. So if we call this C, then the ending balance is just equal to C minus A. C minus A. Okay, I hope that's not too confusing, right? So then that means that this is the 5,600 minus the 5,600. So that puts us back to $0. And that is the amortization table, pretty much. The key thing here is to remember that the interest payment is made up of two parts, the interest and the repayment of principal. Okay, let's do some more just as practice, because the more you practice with these, the better, and then hopefully the easier it gets. Okay, question 2. 1 year ago, you borrowed 4,800 at 6.5% from the bank. You expect this loan to be paid off this year. Okay, so you're going to pay it off in 1 year. You want to know how much you will pay in interest for the second year period. Okay. So you want to know how much you will pay in interest for the second year period. So you borrowed 1 year ago. So we're starting the second year. That's okay. So how much should we borrow? We borrowed 4,800 for how many years? For 2 years, right? 1 year ago, right? So that's last year. And it says it'll be paid off this year. So that means it's 2 years. At the rate of 6.5%. Now let's solve for the payment. First step, solve for the payment. Second, clear my time value of money. Left to right, how many years? This is 2 years. The interest is 6.5. Okay, present value is what we borrowed, the 4,800. The payment is what we're looking for, and we're going to go to 0 because we're paying it off. We're going to compute the payment. So 2,636, and I'm going to keep those decimals, 2,636. So the payment is 2,636, and then let's see, we're going to do 0.46. What if we do 0.46? Our ending balance may be like a penny or two. I mean, if we do more, then we'll be more accurate, but in this case, it starts to get a little burdensome to keep track of all the decimals. So 0.46 it is. 0.46 it is. Okay, so let's do our amortization table. We're going to have 2 years here, year 1, year 2. The beginning amount is what we borrowed, right? That's what our loan starts off with. Now the payment is the same for every year. Okay, that's part of the amortization process. The payment is $2,636.46. You'll see that the second year, it's exactly the same payment. It doesn't matter if you have 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, 10 year, the payment will always be exactly the same, okay? Interest. Now remember what I said about interest. Interest is the beginning amount for that year, 4,800 times the rate. So let's calculate that. So 4,800 times 0.065, that's 6.5%. That gives me 312. That's how much we're paying in interest. So 312, that's exactly 0 cents. So the repayment of principal, we're gonna subtract the 312. Subtract the 312 from the 2,636. Okay, So I'm just going to get back that to compute that payment. I know it's there. Then I'm going to make it positive, and I'm going to subtract $312. So that what I pay towards the principal of that loan is actually $2,324.46. $2,324.46. See if we get that right. 2,324.46. Okay. And now the ending balance is going to be our repayment of principal minus our beginning amount minus what we paid down in principal, right? This is the principal here. Okay. Principal. All right, so we're going to take our $4,800, which is what we borrowed, and we're going to reduce that amount by what we've paid in the principal, which is the minus $23.24.46. That leaves us with an ending balance of $2,475.54. $2,475.54. Okay, let me just make sure that that's accurate. Okay, great. Now, the beginning balance of the next year is the ending balance of the previous year. Okay, so we're going to start with $2,475.54. Okay, the payment, remember, is going to be exactly the same through the whole life of the loan. That's kind of the point of amortization. Okay, you get fixed payments. Now, what is the interest going to be? The interest is going to be that $2,475, okay, and 54 cents times the rate. This is our interest rate, right? So when we pay interest, we pay it on the beginning balance amount. So times 0.065, that gives us 160.91 cents. 160.91 cents. And then the repayment of principal is just our payment minus the interest. That tells us how much we paid in principal. So we're going to do 2,636.46 cents minus 2,636.46, yeah, minus 160.91. Okay, so what we paid down in the principal payment should match exactly what we started off with. So 2,475.55, 2,475.55. Now we're going to subtract this from this, and we're going to get an ending balance. So I can see off the top of my head that there's really only a difference of a penny, right? And that has to do with the rounding. We only kept it to 2 decimal places, and that's okay. All right, that's totally acceptable. All right, so I hope you're getting good practice. I hope this is making sense. Okay, don't worry, we have one more problem for you to practice. Okay, this one's a little bit more involved. So you run a payday loan company and have no problem charging your customers 100% annual interest rate. Ooh, you're not a very nice person. A customer has asked to borrow $1,000 and is on a plan to pay it off in 3 years. Produce an amortization table for this customer. What is the total interest this customer paid over the 3-year period? Okay, so how much are they borrowing? They are borrowing $1,000 for 3 years at a rate of 100%. So let's figure out what that payment is. Let's do second clear. So 3 years, interest rate is what we're looking for. Present value is the $1,000 that they're borrowing. The payment is what we're looking for. Sorry, the interest rate is right here, 100. Right, we're looking for the payment. Future value is 0, so compute payment. So the payment is $1,142.86. So $1,142.86 cents. So let's just make sure 142.86 cents. That's it. So notice that just the payment alone, even though it's 3 years, at 100% requires that he makes almost $1,100 payments every year, which is kind of wild, right? So let's do, and I'll just be honest, some of these loan places, the way they do this is they say we charge 8% per month, right? So 8 times 12, now you're looking at 96%. So this question is not that unrealistic. Okay, let's get into here. We have year 1, year 2, and year 3. And remember, I told you the payments are going to be exactly the same. So you can just write those in now because those are going to be exactly the same for every single year. Okay, so you could just get that out of the way right away. The beginning amount is our principal or what we borrowed. So this is going to be $1,000. Okay, so now we can start on the interest. Remember, the interest is the interest rate times the beginning amount. So 100% times 1,000. Let's just make sure we get that right. Right? Times times 100%, which is just 1, right? That's going to be 1, right? So, for example, let's we use this 100 and we use the percentage. Notice it changes that to 1. If we multiply it times 1,000, of course, it's going to give us 1,000. So we're paying $1,000 just in interest, okay? To find the principal, we take the payment minus the interest, right? That leaves us with $142.86. That's what we've paid down. That's the amount we've paid down. What is the ending balance? Well, that's going to be the 1,000 minus 142.86. So it's going to be at the end of the first year, we still owe $857.14. $857.14. Now, this ending balance becomes our beginning balance, $857.14. So we start over. Now the interest is the 100% times the $857.14. But we know we're just multiplying by 1 because it's 100%, right? But you could do that. You could take the $857.14, multiply it by 100% or just 1, and that's going to leave us with $857.14. Now you subtract to get the principal payment, the payment minus the interest, okay? So let's go back to 1,142.86 minus 857.14. That leaves us with repayment of principal for that year of $285.72. $285.72. Okay, now ending balance is our beginning balance minus our repayment of principal. So $857.14 minus $285.72, $571.42. So at the end of the second year, we still owe $571.42. So that's what the third year starts with, $571.42. Okay, so $571.42 at 100% interest rate is, let's make sure we get that right. Yeah, $571.42. And now we're going to subtract the 1,142.86 minus 571.42. Okay, that leaves us with a payment of, notice it's exactly the same as our beginning amount because it's our last year and we're paying it off, $571.44. $571.44. We're off by 0.02. If you want to get this exactly accurate, then what I suggest you do is you keep all 4 decimal places on the payment, and that'll get you effectively to 0. All right, but we're not done because what is the question? It says, what is the total interest this customer paid over the 3-year period? So here is the interest. We need to add these 3 up. That'll give us the total interest paid. So let's do that. 571.42. Well, let's erase it. We have 1,000 in the first year plus 857.14 plus 571.42. 571.42. So the total interest paid was $2,428.56. $2,428.56. That's the total interest. Okay, 2,428.56. Of course, the total repayment of principal is going to equal the $1,000 that we borrowed. Go ahead and try that out. Okay, and you know, it should equal this $1,000. Maybe it's off by a penny or two, but it should equal it. All right. Now, one thing I want to point out is I could ask you all sorts of things about this. That's what's really interesting about this problem is I could ask you, for example, of the total payment, what percentage in the first year went to interest and what percentage went to the repayment of principal. I could ask you, well, it wouldn't make sense to ask you what the total repayment of principal was because that's just what we borrowed, but I could ask you that, right? I could ask you, I like to ask this question. What percentage of interest was paid in the last year? Or what percentage of repayment of principal was paid in the last year? And of course, it's going to be of the payment, right? So if I were to ask you what percentage of interest was paid in the first year, it would be 1,000 divided by 1,142.86. So you'd be paying 87.50%. So in the first year, 87.50% of your payment would go towards interest. And then the remainder, the 12.50%, would be the repayment of principal. Now, if I asked you to do the same calculation in the last year, then that would change, right? 571.42 of the payment. Let's just do that really quick. So 571.42 divided by 1142.86. That's going to be 50%. So in the last year, 50% went towards interest and 50% went towards the repayment of principal. Okay, there might be a little difference because of the, difference in the cents here, but for the most part, it'll be accurate. All right, I like to ask those kinds of questions because it really helps me make sure that you know how this logically works. Okay, so keep that in mind. All right, so that should be pretty much it. A few takeaways. Remember that the payments consist of part interest payment and part principal payment. The principal payment is deducted from the starting amount to give you the ending balance. So that's just what I was saying here. The principal payment, let me make sure I got that right. The principal payment is deducted from the starting amount to give you the ending balance. Yes. So what that's saying is, to get the ending balance, we deduct the principal payment from the beginning amount, okay? And next year's starting balance is the current year's ending balance. So that's just here. The ending balance is next year's beginning balance. Okay, guys, congratulations. This is the end for time value of money. I really hope you got something out of this. I hope this was helpful, and I look forward to getting your questions, and I hope you got something of value of this. And I'll keep making videos as long as you guys are watching them. All right, I'll see you in the next one.